Now, since the toppling of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, people have been searching for their missing loved ones in the regime's notorious prisons. Now, bodies are being discovered in mass graves across the country. A UN spokesperson said the evidence must be secured and preserved to bring justice and accountability. There are estimates that hundreds of thousands could be buried in Syrian mass graves.
Digging up Syria's missing. These men find the human remains of those who were buried in what appears to be a mass grave in the southern Syrian town of Isra.
We came after the army left the farm to rebuild it from scratch. We were surprised to find the area very barren and the land was not set up for farming, which made me suspicious. So we contacted the relevant authorities and reported the situation to them. That something was wrong in this area, that we had found graves.
Across the country, another mass grave is found near the Syrian capital, Damascus. This footage shows deep trenches in the ground, where many bodies of those reportedly killed by the regime have been disposed of. The Syrian Civil Defense, also known as the White Helmets, have been collecting bags of skeletal remains.
We received more than 100 calls about mass graves. People believe that at every military site they are there. The number of people who came out of prison is very low, and the number of people missing is very large.
For some families of victims, there is a glimmer of hope that they might find closure. But people involved in the search say the task is too difficult for locals.
We're calling on international and human rights organisations to come and open these graves so we can find our children and determine whether they are dead. Where are they? Whose son is this and whose son is that? We don't know.
The United Nations has stressed that preserving mass graves and documentation is critical for any attempts of bringing those accountable to justice. Advocacy groups believe tens of thousands of missing Syrians could be buried in mass graves across the country.
The UN body set up to investigate international crimes during Syria's civil war is calling on the country's new leaders to secure evidence related to those atrocities. The agency's leader, former Canadian prosecutor Robert Petit, says he and his team are hoping to travel to Syria in the coming days to see the situation firsthand and to gather evidence.
It's a very delicate and fluid situation. There is, however, the potential in this now accessible crime scene, or maybe I should say interlocking series of crime scenes. There is now the possibility of accessing evidence of the highest level. When you're talking about a government, a state apparatus who for 14 years used every aspect of that apparatus to commit crimes, you will have a massive amount of documentation left behind.
For more, we're joined by Dr. Stefanie Bock, an expert in international criminal law and a professor at Germany's Marburg University. She also is executive director of the International Research and Documentation Centre for War Crimes Trials, which focuses on documenting war crimes trials. Dr. Bock, welcome to DW. Great to have you on the show. So what do you think the chances are that Bashar al-Assad could ever face prosecution, and what would the charges be?
It's easier to answer what the charges would be. They would probably relate to crimes against humanity and war crimes in particular, with a view to torture. It's more problematic, the question how to get him, particularly because he is now fled to Russia, and Russia will protect him from further prosecution.
OK, well then what about other members of the Assad regime who could still actually remain in Syria?
We have different possibilities. We have already seen trials on the basis of universal jurisdictions in so-called third states. So, for example, we had trials concerning state torture in Syria, in Germany, in France, and the United States. These efforts can be continued now. And of course, under the new government, Syria may itself decide to deal with those crimes and to bring justice to the victims. And there's even the possibility that the new government will sign the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court and give this court the opportunity to deal with crimes committed in Syria.
All right, well, explain a little bit more, if you could, the role of the International Criminal Court and what it could be. Syria never ratified the treaty and is not covered by ICC jurisdiction.
Oh, yes, it's true. The International Criminal Court is seat in The Hague, is a permanent institution who has the power to prosecute genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression, but as a basic rule, only to parties with a view to the state parties who have ratified the statute. And Syria so far has never joined the ICC, but the new government may make a new decision and ratify the statute and even accept the jurisdiction of the international courts for crimes which have been committed in the past.
OK, well, what about Germany? I'm in Berlin, you're in Marburg. So it's a country that recognises universal jurisdiction for some international crimes. So what could happen in the case of Germany?
Germany will surely continue his efforts to prosecute state crimes committed in Syria. We have already seen cases concerning torture in Koblenz, and at the moment there is a case before the Higher Regional Court of Frankfurt, also concerning state torture in Syria. So Germany will continue to prosecute these crimes, but the problem, of course, is that Germany can only prosecute perpetrators who have fled to Germany, so it's a very limited approach that Germany has.
All right, talk to us a little about a landmark trial here in Germany, the Al-Khatib trial. It would be interesting for you to explain a little bit about that and what lessons were learned from that process.
This was an important trial because it was the first time ever that criminal court dealt with state torture in Syria, and the two accused have been sanctioned for crimes against humanity, in particular torture in a prison setting. And the most challenging part of this trial probably was the difficult situation for victims and witnesses. When this trial took place, the Assad government was still in power and exercised pressure on victims and witnesses who were to testify in Koblenz and even acted against their families, which were in part still in Syria. And another problem is, of course, that the evidence is far away from the place of the court. So it was very challenging for a German court to prosecute and learn about crimes which have been committed far away from the court and to transfer the evidence from Syria to Germany and to evaluate this evidence here in a national context.
All right, we'll leave it there. Very interesting speaking to Dr. Stefanie Bock, Professor of International Criminal Law. Thanks for joining us today on DW.